All right, good evening, everybody. It's time for us to get started. We are in the middle of 1 Samuel 18 tonight. We'll be starting at about verse 17 in just a moment, and we're really glad that you're here. Glad we have this time to study together. We have visitors with us, and we're glad that you're here, and hope that this study tonight is valuable for you. We are studying the whole Bible, not all tonight, but we are in the middle of the United Kingdom. And we are looking at the period of time where Saul and his reign are on the decline, and David really is kind of in the phase of his initial rise. So we're not really in the period of Saul's pursuing David yet, though that's coming quickly. But we are kind of in that initial phase of Saul's animosity towards David, and David kind of trying to fill that situation out and the consequences of that. So when we come to chapter 18, I think we have kind of I think chapter 18 is structured around basically something to do with Saul and then a report of David's success. So you have in verse 5, David went out and was successful. And then you have again in verses 12 through 16, the Lord was with David. David had success. The Lord was with him. He had great success. And then in a few minutes, we'll look at the last one at the end of chapter 18. The Lord was with David, verse 28. Verse 30, David had more success than all the servants of Saul. So you kind of have these three moments in chapter 18 reporting the successes of David and the Lord's presence with David. Now, kind of interspersed in between those are other, so you've got Saul's son and his clothes. And I think we talked about last time that this is I think a picture of Jonathan kind of handing over the rights to David, like a recognition that he's the heir apparent, even though Jonathan is the king's son. And then we talked about Saul's displeasure and his spear as David is there. The celebration that the people have of David. Saul's killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And Saul's jealousy is aroused, and so he tries to kill David at least twice in this case. And then you have that report of his success. Now, this next section, beginning in verse 17, is going to focus on Saul's daughter and her price. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Before we get to verse 17, anybody have anything by way of review or leading into this that they'd like to make mention of, Alan, especially? Okay. All right. So why don't you take us through however much of this you want to, and then,
Okay. Yeah. Then Saul said to David, "Here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as wife, only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, "Let my hand not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him." So David said to Saul, "Who am I, and what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" But it happened at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel the Meholite as a wife. Now Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and she told Saul, and the thing pleased him. So Saul said, "I will give her to him, that she may be a snare to him, and the hand of the Philistines may be against him." Therefore Saul said to David a second time, "You shall be my son-in-law today." And so here, if you remember Saul's promise to the one that defeated Goliath, he had three promises to that person. He would enrich him with great riches, he would give him his daughter, and he would make that man's father's house tax exempt in Israel, were the three promises that he was going to give. So the promise about his daughter here, it seems, and I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it seems like David's hesitant to do this. And then in the meantime, his daughter gets married off to someone else. And I don't know if that's a combination of the two things not working together, or if Saul's not carrying out his part, or what. Do you have anything you want to say about?
My thinking is probably it's Saul going back on the word that he had given. I think David's hesitancy here is a noble humility.
Yes.
And we may talk more about that in a bit, but I think he is hesitant. I think he's hesitant for good reason, not for some kind of, I think because of humility. And then I think Saul just is tired of waiting or is playing a game with him or something.
Right. And I mean, you can see that in the fact he wants him to go out and fight the battles. And he's like, I can't raise my hand against him because the Lord's with him. But maybe the Philistines will beat him. And so maybe that'll still work out in my favor. And then I can't imagine this next part that he's hoping that his daughter will be a snare to him. Can you imagine marrying off your daughter to somebody thinking, well, I hope she really, she's going to bring him down. And so this attitude that he's got towards David, and any attack he can do, and he knows he can't just outright attack him. So he's his wheels are turning. How am I going to get him? Because I know that he's going to be my successor here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, so you said he knows he can't just outright attack him. He will later on, right? I think he'll try to. I think right now he's still realizing how people feel about David. And he's saying it would not be wise, which is funny. He's saying Saul's wisdom is to try to attack David in secret, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's launched a spirit twice already.
Yeah.
But no, not publicly, and he's not been successful yet. But I think he's playing the odds, right? Let's send him against the Philistines. The chances are he'll be taken down at some point.
Right.
But wouldn't all this that Saul's performing is because of him being took away as king, and his family ain't going to be it. The times that David actually plays for Saul to come him down, he's got some kind of evil spirit God's put on him. That the evil spirit might be enticing him to go after David, but God ain't letting him complete what he's trying to do.
Yeah, I have no doubt that God is protecting David here. I imagine Saul was pretty militarily capable, and I don't think David was sitting far away playing the music. So I think I think you're exactly right. There's protection for him.
But what I'm saying is not that he was playing music, but during this time of the whatever's possessing Saul, the only time, as I've read before, and I can't tell you exactly the verse, you probably can, but David would actually play music to Saul to calm his spirit.
Right. Yes, right. So he's already in there. I see what you're saying. He's already in there when Saul has this bad spirit episode. So
Right.
he's already put himself in a bad situation.
Right.
But yeah, my point about him playing music was just that he would be in close proximity, and so I think you're right that the Lord was with him, and that he's already putting himself, like you said, in a bad situation. But anyway, that's right. So Saul does think that he can use. How did you pronounce Michael?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, this works for me. As a snare to trap him. Anything else?
So
Yeah.
with that idea of her ensnaring him, do you think it's just that maybe it is still like the idea of proximity? Like he could use this situation as a snare as opposed to like her specifically?
Right.
Or do you think he looks at his daughter and is like, she won't be good for him? I mean,
No, I don't think it's like bring him down morally or something like that. Though maybe, but I think mostly from what we see in chapter 19, it looks to me like it's because of a trap can be set,
yes.
and that
And even in 18, right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
We'll go back to it, too.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Well, yes, 18 to some degree as far as making him put himself in harm's way for her.
Situation makes sense.
That's right. But I think basically it's the idea of knowing where David's going to be, being able to track him, being able to have tabs on him. Okay. What verse did you make it to?
22.
22. Okay. Anything else through 22? All right. So you do have that humility of David, and I don't think I think from what we know about David and the fact he repeats it again in 23, I don't think we have a false humility here. I think David all along has demonstrated a recognition of he's not much, but he's always put a lot of confidence in the Lord. And I think you'll see with great characters of faith, great faith always goes with great humility. It just is what it is. And what I mean by that is that a person who recognizes who God is can't be proud. And because when you recognize who you are, you have to be humble. And so those things always work together. The more confidence and awareness somebody has of God's work in their life, the greater level of humility. And I think we see that in David particularly. So Saul is not giving up on the son-in-law plan, though it seems like he took a weird tack with it. But he is does take advantage of the fact that Michal loves David. And so in verse 23, David says again, does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I am a poor man and have no reputation? And the servants of Saul told him, thus and so did David speak. Then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged of the king's enemies. Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David arose and went along with his men and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number, to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal for a wife. All right, no bride price at all, except, which is an interesting way for Saul to have said that, because it seems to me that the cost is quite high and pretty dangerous and kind of meticulous work. And so I think that Saul believes that David is going to get caught up in this fight with the Philistines. Well, in fact, that's what the text tells us, and that he's going to be taken down. And the labor that David's bringing, that he's bringing back the evidence of, I think would be a lot. And what does David do? What does he bring back?
Double.
He brings back 200, right? Before the time had expired. And so I will also say this, that Saul's benefiting in every way from David. David's not done one thing that hurts Saul's cause at all, except in Saul's own mind. The only thing that David has done so far, from Goliath down to these Philistines, is rid Saul of problems that he's had. And I don't know, maybe somebody else has more insight of this. I don't think that Saul knows that David is the one that's been chosen yet. We have chapter 16 where he's anointed, chapter 17 where he kills Goliath, chapter 18 where the crowds are singing his praises. And so maybe Saul sees the handwriting on the wall. He knows he's out, but only when he dies, and he knows, and maybe he thinks he can alter that, but David is a threat only in Saul's mind so far. There's nothing confirmed about David being the one taking his place, even though we already know that. That's information I think we're privy to at this point in the text that Saul's not. Anything through that?
Yeah, it mentions that he had eyed him from that day on when they were praising David, but there's no indication in the text that he knows for sure, but he is suspicious of it.
Yeah, and maybe David is the prominent competitor. Saul knows he's out, knows there's somebody else going to be chosen, and so that's what arouses his jealousy. Anyway, and then you have 28 and through 30. Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, which it's interesting that it's not like he assumed or presumed that the Lord was with David. He knows this. He knows Yahweh is with David. And you would think that a reasonable person would say, okay, Yahweh's with David. That's not a battle I want to fight. But this is what jealousy does, right? He knows the facts. He knows Yahweh is with David, and yet he's afraid of him, so he makes David his enemy. And then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so his name was highly esteemed. Let me just, this is in 2 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 1, so it's jumping ahead quite a bit. But this is how the writer of Samuel describes basically everything that happens from here on. 2 Samuel 3 verse 1. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew steadily stronger, but the house of Saul grew weaker continually. That's the story for the rest of 1 Samuel. You have the decline of Saul and the rise of David. Steadily, little by little, David's increasing, Saul is decreasing, and until the point that Saul is killed and David is then enthroned as king. All right, any thoughts through chapter 18?
So I think it's interesting that David, when Saul asked him to be his son-in-law for the second time, he says that he's poor and lightly esteemed, and by the end of 18, I don't know about the poor aspect of it, but he's highly esteemed. And so if Saul has kept promoting him and then is his son-in-law, surely he's not poor anymore.
Certainly has some reputation.
Yes.
Everything Saul was doing to bring David down was actually
Yeah.
increasing David's, popularity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah, several of Saul's failures do that, right?
Yeah.
So his failure to face Goliath allows David an opportunity to grow in the sight of the people.
Yeah.
You know, to prove his loyalty to God.
Saul could have had that acclaim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
He did.
he did. And then what we see here is again his fall into promoting David and giving him a time. You were talking about maybe Saul not knowing at this point. I don't know if this passage is super helpful, but it was something I thought was necessary. But it was, and I'm sure you thought of this, but 1 Samuel 24, verse 20, Saul says there, he says, "And now I know that you, the Lord, has made you king." Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when he says, "And now I know," if he means, "Oh, it's literally just dawned on me," or if he's saying, "Maybe I've had my suspicions, and now."
Yeah. So by that point, he says the evidence is clear.
Right.
That's a good passage to look at. Thank you. Okay. Anything else through 18? All right. Let's go to chapter 19.
Okay. Now Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted greatly in David. So Jonathan told David, saying, "My father seeks to kill you. Therefore, please be on your guard until morning, and stay in a secret place and hide. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. Then I will observe, I will tell you. And then what I observe, I will tell you." Thus Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good towards you. For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then should you sin against innocent blood to kill David without cause? So Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, "As the Lord lives, that he shall not be killed." Then Jonathan called David, and David, excuse me. Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all the things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. And so Jonathan's trying to reason with him here. And he says, just look at what David has done. And he's not just done this to try to make himself look good. He's done these things for you, in service to you. And so it seems like at this time that he, at least in appearance, appeases Saul. And he says, okay, I won't kill him. And he even says here that he swore, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be killed." And so I don't know if Saul's got a mental illness and he's got like split personalities, or if he's just trying to, okay, I see that Jonathan, that you're very loyal to him, so I'm just going to say what you want to hear. And so again, I don't know which of the two it is, but it seems like it's one of the two. Like he's either schizophrenic, or he's just trying to play off Jonathan because he sees where his allegiance lie in that. And go ahead.
I was just saying, I feel like I've had moments like that before, but like maybe where I'm really struggling with something, and I have moments of clarity. Like, okay, I can see this is not good, but that's not. It doesn't last long.
Right.
Like, I'm in the middle of all of it, and it's I go back into maybe long stretches of doing what I was doing before, and I have a moment of clarity again. Okay, I got to stop it.
Mm.
And so I think that could be what's happening with Saul here. Is he maybe having these brief moments of clarity. It's not necessarily split personality, but it's kind of similar, right? He's double-minded.
Yeah, and I think by the time we at least get to the end, and even now, I don't think we would put much past Saul as far as his moral fiber would have. And we certainly wouldn't say that he's exercising wisdom and that's what Jonathan's trying to get him to see, is that not only is this not right, you're shedding innocent blood, but it's not your best interest. Everything he's done has been a benefit to you. I think there are 4 deliverances in chapter 19. I think this is deliverance number 1. Now, maybe this one's not as impressive of a deliverance, but it's Jonathan going to Saul and trying to reason with him. And there is at least a period of time now where David's able to be back in Saul's presence. Okay, anything through verse 7? All right, let's look at verses 8 through 10. And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a great blow so that they fled before him. Then a harmful spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand. and David was playing the lyre. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with a spear, but he eluded Saul, so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. So, first of all, Saul is already breaking his oath, his oath in Yahweh's name, and so that shows. I made mention at the end of chapter 18, he knows Yahweh is with David, and that doesn't affect him. Now he's sworn by Yahweh's name, and that doesn't affect him. I think we're getting a picture here of the kind of relationship that Saul has with the Lord. Right? It's not just about David. There's a gap between Saul and God that is leading to this kind of rash and unwise actions. The words here, struck them, talking about the Philistines, and fled, are the same words in verse 10 as struck and fled when it's talking about David in verse 10. So I think this is the picture. Who's going out to fight the Philistines? David. When Saul was the one who had been given the job of king to be the defender of Israel. But instead of defending Israel, he's trying to strike down Israelites. He's trying to strike down David. And so you have David going out when it looks to me like Saul's staying back. And then coming in and Saul's trying to strike him like David had been striking the Philistines. And so you have the word escaped, verse 10. It'll reappear in verse 11, verse 12, verse 17, verse 18. That word escaped, you'll see a theme in chapter 19 for this word escape. So that's deliverance number 2. And maybe we don't see on the surface any divine activity, but I think there is at least the idea that God is with David here and that he's protecting him. Anything through verse 10?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in verse 8, like it says that David struck the Philistines with a mighty blow. So like he's being extremely successful in battle here. And just the fact that Saul has done this before, tried to pin him to the wall with a spear, and David, at least the text doesn't tell us if there's any hesitation there or not, but it seems like, well, the king has commanded me to come before him to play, and that's what I'm going to do. Because he's a good servant for one, and then he trusts in God.
And he's in this kind of reprieve period, like after Jonathan has talked to him, and so maybe like Jonathan's like, "Look, David, I talked sense into him. Everything's going to be fine." Because Jonathan is convinced that everything's fine. Right? Like he takes his father. So when we get to chapter 20,
right,
David says, "Your dad's trying to kill me," and he says, "No, that could not be the case." And I mean, it's David has to be like, "What do you mean, though? Have you been around? Have you heard what's happening?" So by the time we get to chapter 20, it's like the evidence is clear. But I do think that Jonathan is convinced that maybe this has been helpful. And David at least seems to be willing to continue, like you said, out of obligation maybe to Saul.
Right. And I think probably some of that played off of that. I don't know why I didn't think of this, but I mean, he sees what kind of man Jonathan is. Yeah. And so that would just help Saul's case even more. This is a good, honest man trying to serve the Lord, and he tells me that his fathers were good. So I trust him and I believe him.
That's right. Okay. Anything to verse 10? You can take us from 11.
Saul also sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to kill him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through the window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed and put a cover of goat's hair for his head and covered it with clothes. So when Saul sent messengers to David, she said, "He is sick." Then Saul sent messengers back to see David, saying, Bring him up to me in the bed, and that I may kill him." And when the messengers had come in, there was the image in the bed with a cover of goat's hair for his head. Then Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me in this, and sent my enemy away, so that he has escaped?" And Michal answered Saul, "He said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I kill you?'" So here we have David's wife protecting him, and she's not doing it honestly, but she is, and from her, I guess, upbringing, maybe it's not surprising to us the way that she's acting here. But she helps David out and lets him out a window and helps him escape, and then she sets up this decoy. Thank you. Sets up a decoy for Saul's men. So when they do ask about, well, let's see him, maybe they'll look in on him and turn away. And then Saul hears about all this, and he's like, well, why did you deceive me? And, well, then she tries to put it off on David here to kind of save her own skin and her relationship with her father. Like, he was going to kill me if I didn't let him go. So what did you want me to do? You want me to just die here? And so really, she's putting the blame off on David in Saul's eyes and kind of keeping that to where he don't fully understand that, well, you betrayed me also. And he doesn't think that all of his kids were against him at this point anyway. But it is interesting that, Saul's not going to give up at all. He's like, go to David's house and kill him, pretty much. And it doesn't seem like there's any time, which we don't have time stamps in here, but it seems like it's just one thing after another, and I don't know how close together these things are related. And as Austin said, maybe he's having these moments of clarity in between these attacks that he's doing, and then I don't know how much this distressing spirit is playing a part in Saul's actions or not. But whether it is or whether it isn't, Saul is the one in control here. And so the fact that he knows that he's not going to hold on to the kingship, he's fighting anyone and everyone who looks like a challenger. And I think he sees David as that challenger as of now. And I don't think he understands that David is going to be the next king. He just sees he's got the potential to be the next king.
Yeah, what word did yours say in verse 13? Michael took an image. Is that what yours says?
Yeah, image.
Yeah. So the English Standard says image. New King James says image. New American Standard says household idol. Is that what you have, New American Standard? Yeah. So the word is teraphim, something like that. So I think maybe the Old King James leaves it untranslated and just leaves it teraphim. But this image is not just some neutral image, not like just like a cat statue that they have in the house. I don't know. It's a household idol, and so that raises questions. So I was reading a few commentaries about what Michael's doing here, and they were justifying her lying here. I don't know that I don't think we have to go that far. I don't think we have to make a moral case for lying using Michael. I wouldn't do that because there's a lot of things here that I'm bothered by about the situation, right? That David's here with and this household idol and. Anyway, it doesn't matter, really, except to say this, that it reminds me a lot of the Rahab story. And I think we're supposed to pick up on echoes like this in the scriptures. I'm not saying that they just made up this story to sound like the Rahab story. What I'm saying is that things kind of have a way of repeating themselves. And in that case, Saul is more like the Canaanite king, than he is like the faithful Israelites. David is being put in the position of faithful Israelite, while Saul is being portrayed as Canaanite-like. And we know that, right? We know he is a king like the nations. We know he is a king like the Canaanites had. And he's not operating like a king like God would want. He's operating like a king like the nations would want. And so it's only going to serve to destroy him. But then we see deliverance number 3, where David is able to escape. And of course, Michael, as Alan May mentioned, puts the blame off on David and says that her life was in danger. I don't know how much Saul buys that, but it doesn't really matter at this point, I guess.
Would her life not be in danger from the king for such deception?
Yeah.
Even though it's his daughter,
Right. Yeah, so that may be why she says, look, he threatened me. What was I supposed to do? So, yeah. That's right.
Well, 2 things. First of all, what Saul does is pretty cold. Like, it's pretty ruthless to be like, yeah, if he's sick, I don't care. Bring him up here and I'm going to kill him. I mean, that's like, bring him up here in his bed. Like, just drag him up here. I'll kill him the way he is. That's pretty ruthless to do. I think at this point, he's not too worried about hiding. So you're talking about like outright attacking. It's like right here, I mean, he shifted gears, right? He went from trying to do it another means, and he shifted, and he's pretty ruthless about it. And the second thing is, I understand maybe Michael has the same mentality as Saul does, like self-preservation. Saul's about self-preservation. And Michael here seems to be like that. It's like, this can't help Saul's feelings toward David. I mean, and like I said, I don't know if he bought it or not, but let's say he did. I mean, he wouldn't need much reason to buy the idea that David is against him again, right?
Right.
And so I can just imagine, Michael's not really helping David's case here overall, even if she thinks she's saving herself.
Very good. Anything else? Okay. Let's look at verse 18. So now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and lived at Naioth. Does anybody say something different than Naioth there? All right. So the word just means dwellings, and so it looks like, well, verse 19 says, and it was told Saul, behold, David is at Naioth and Ramah. So it looks like maybe there was like a prophetic community at Ramah, and maybe that's the idea of going to the dwellings, the place where the prophets stayed in Ramah. So it's within the town of Ramah, which is where Samuel has been most of the time. Anyway, so verse 20. So Saul sent messengers to take David. And when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying and Samuel standing as head over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. When it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah and came to the great well that is in Succoth. And he asked, where are Samuel and David? And one said, behold, they are at Naioth and Ramah. And he went there to Naioth and Ramah. And the Spirit of God came upon him also, and he prophesied. As he went, he prophesied until he came to Naioth and Ramah. And he too stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay naked all that day and all that night. Thus it is said, is Saul also among the prophets? Okay, so a lot going on here. First of all, this is going to be deliverance number 4 in chapter 19. This one is going to be more overtly God working directly to deliver David. And basically, what it looks like happening is every wave of servants that Saul sends kind of get taken over in this prophetic trance or whatever. And then ultimately, the fourth one that comes is Saul, and he gets taken over. Now, Saul has done some prophesying before. Right? This is way back in, chapter 10, when Saul is going to be anointed as king, and he's prophesying. And that's where the proverb starts. Is Saul also among the prophets? Here's going to be picked up again, but maybe with a slightly different turn on that. Saul's prophesying, but not in maybe what he would think of as the ideal way. So when he comes, he comes there, and he strips off his clothes, and he lays naked. If I understand correctly, this does not have to mean that he's just completely nude, right? That this is the idea of taking off his outer garment and being at least unclothed as far as the level to which you would be considered to be clothed in God's eyes, right? So he's naked, not in the sense that he's just completely exposed, but that he's more exposed than he ought to be. Now, taking off that outer garment, the people who know things about this say that that's probably indicative of some kind of statements regarding his royal position. I think the Spirit of God is actually kind of compelling him. He removes his outer garment. It's almost like a picture demonstration of him. The kingship is being taken away from him. And so you've already had that a little bit with Jonathan giving his clothing to David. And now here is Saul kind of removing that from himself. One thing I want to see is that David is not usurping the throne. I think maybe one of the reasons why God would have given that age of people a book like Samuel might have been to kind of establish and confirm his faithfulness to David and that David is king because he put him there. And in this case, David is doing nothing to harm Saul. And in fact, the heir of Saul, at least heir apparent, and Saul's daughter are doing everything they can to aid David. So he's not working at cross purposes with the Saul family. He's not even working at cross purposes with Saul, if Saul would think clearly about this. And so I think maybe that's an important point that we see through chapter 19. Anything else that you would like to say? Alan, you got something?
So didn't it mention before that Samuel wouldn't see Saul again to the day of his death?
Yes, that's right. I would say that perhaps he doesn't see him now.
Okay.
He doesn't make it that far.
I got you.
That would be my idea.
So like verse 24, when it says he too prophesied before.
Okay, that's a good point. That does throw a wrench in things.
And it might have mentioned that Samuel won't go to Saul. And maybe it's
Yeah,
the way it was worded previously.
If Samuel would have died on that day, that'd have made things a lot easier for me. But I don't think he did. So I'll have to take another look at that. That is a good question.
I do think, I would say this real quick, and I don't think I said this, maybe I didn't mean it, but the fact that goes to Samuel,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and like you just mentioned, Samuel does it like a broken off relationship with Saul. Again, is indicative of their relationship with God, right? And it is interesting, at least it's interesting to me, that David feels comfortable enough with Samuel to be able to go to him whenever he's weak. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess in my mind, I wouldn't imagine they had much of a relationship outside of Samuel anointing him. That was pretty much it. Looks like seems like there's a relationship there.
Yeah.
It does say Samuel went no more to see Saul.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes a difference. Saul came to him in this instance.
Where is that?
15th. Yeah, Austin, the English Standard says did not see Saul, but I wonder if the idea of it did not go to see Saul. I think that is at least helpful in kind of fitting all that together. That's good.
First Chronicles 13. Bringing the heart back.
Yes, sir.
David brings up the fact that inquired of the Lord because we did not do it in Saul's days.
Mm.
I think that's what that means. Saul and Samuel never got together to inquire before.
Yeah. I think there are at least possible explanations. So, whichever one we land on, I think that is a good thing to think about. And I'll
You got
try.
to remember too, Saul reigned 40 years, so
Yeah.
God didn't pull his kingdom out. And then also too, David was born probably the 10th year of Saul's reign.
Yeah.
So David's between 15 and 25 years old.
Yeah.
So he's making all these decisions as a leader at a very young
Uh-huh.
age.
Yeah. I wonder if prophesying before Samuel may not necessarily mean that Samuel sees him. You know what I mean? That like he's just in his realm. He's in his territory. He's in his He's in his vicinity, right? Like laying in front of the tabernacle or something. But anyway, that's a good question. I'll ponder that. They may come up with nothing, because that's what often happens when I ponder things. Okay. What I'd like to do right now, if it's all right, we have a few minutes, and really we've covered what we need to cover for tonight. I would like to look at a couple of Psalms that don't have time markers on them, but I think make sense in this period. So they're not on your curriculum. We do have some on the curriculum. If you'll look like next time, there's Alan has here written Psalm 34 and 56, and they are specifically tied to the events. Especially at the end of, they're tied specifically to the events of 20 through 22. What I want to do is look at a couple of these Psalms that are not given specific time markers, but I think the language points us to they are written during David's time fleeing. So Psalm 13, we're going to look at 13 and 31, and then if we have more time, maybe we can look at one more. But I think these are helpful, and maybe we can have some just like application, thoughtful points to make from this. So Psalm 13 is very brief. How long, O Yahweh, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart all the day? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Look and answer me, O Yahweh, my God. Give light to my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy says I have overcome him, and my adversaries rejoice that I am shaken. So let's pause there for just a second. David's a man of great faith. Can you imagine that there were some times in his life, I mean, he's expressing it here, where this is exactly how he feels? That Yahweh has abandoned him, that Yahweh's forgotten him, that he might go to sleep and then his sleep end up being the sleep of death. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Right? When he's there with Michal, and it could be just that he wakes up and doesn't wake up. And so he is at least expressing God, are you going to turn your face away forever? Have you abandoned me? Now, what do we know having read 1 Samuel? Well, no, still, in the chapters that we've looked at, like, has God abandoned him? Has God turned his face away? No. Now, from David's point of view, right? I'm running from home. I can't go do my job. I'm getting spears thrown at me. Saul seems to be exalted. And I would say maybe even more so at other points along the way. Saul is going to seem to have the upper hand, and David is going to be, literally just a criminal on the run. But I like verse 5 and 6. But I have trusted in your loving kindness. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to Yahweh because he has dealt bountifully with me. The beauty of David being able to say, almost in the same breath, God, have you forgotten me? Are you not paying attention? Have you turned your face away from me forever? Are my enemies going to win over me? And without, just barely taking a breath, say, but I'm going to trust in you. Because I know you've been faithful to me before. And I know you'll be faithful again. And I think that I think that the Bible gives us a pattern for being frustrated and feeling forsaken and alone. And the pattern is not just roll around in the doubts, but it's not ignore them either. Right? It is saying, look, I don't feel like I have God's presence here. I don't know how God is helping me here. But I think coming back to verses 5 and 6 is helpful. He has been faithful. He will be faithful again. I know about his loving kindness. I know about his faithfulness. And I don't see it right now. But David, when he doesn't see it, doesn't let go. And there's a difference in not seeing God's hand in a moment versus not seeing God's hand, period. And I think that's the difference here with David. And so maybe that's something helpful. I have never been chased by the king of Israel. But if you ever are, this might be a feeling that you would have. And maybe this would be a psalm for you. Or if you're in a similar dangerous or frustrating situation. All right, so Psalm 13. Let's look at Psalm 31. Psalm 31. This one is significant beyond the story of David because in verse 5, into your hand I commit my spirit. What does that sound like?
Jesus.
Sounds like Jesus on the cross, right? And I think that we can take those same sentiments that we've just talked about with Psalm 13 and think about. Here's a moment where it looks like the adversary has triumphed. It looks like he has won. And David says, I have entrusted myself to you, God. And Jesus on the cross, when it looks like the great adversary is in victory, Jesus quotes David and says, Father, in your hand I commit my spirit. So look at verse 1. In you, O Yahweh, I have taken refuge. Let me never be ashamed. In your righteousness protect me. Incline your ear to me. Deliver me quickly. Be to me a rock of strength, a fortress to save me. For you are my high rock and my fortress. For your name's sake you will lead me and guide me. You will bring me out of the net which they have secretly laid for me. For you are my strength. Into your hand I commit my spirit. You have ransomed me, O Yahweh, God of truth. I think about as he surrounds David and Michal's house. And there's a net that's been set. And David says, you'll bring me out of the net which they have secretly laid for me. I don't know when he wrote that, but maybe reflecting on occasions like that, when it looked like Saul had him, God delivers him. And maybe also we could say something about verse 6, I hate those who regard worthless idols, which was in the house that night. So maybe he's just thinking about that occasion and say, yeah, I don't like those idols either, just for the record. If anybody's wondering what I had to do with that, it was not mine, it was all Michal's. So, okay. But there's more here in chapter 30, Psalm 31, that is like verse 7, I will rejoice and be glad in your loving kindness, because you have seen my affliction. You have known the troubles of my soul. You have not given me over into the hand of my enemy. You have set my feet in a large place. Down in verse 15, my times are in your hand. Deliver me from the hand of my enemies and from those who pursue me. So, in other words, all the way through Psalm 31, there are these hints, I think, that maybe David is writing this on the run. And maybe these are good Psalms to think about when it feels like we have been overcome by evil or by those who would seek to do us harm. And say, and say with David, God, have you forgotten me? Have you forsaken me? No, that can't be it, because you're faithful. and I've seen your loving kindness all the way along. So maybe helpful things to consider. Alan, anything before we shut down for the night?
I don't think so.
Okay. Next time, I will not be here. I'm gonna be in a meeting with the brethren in Andalusia. I've never even been to Andalusia, so I just hope there's actually a town there when I get there. But we'll be with the brethren there next week, and so Brother Gerald is going to fill in my place Sunday night, and I think Austin's going to take it Wednesday night. And I know they're going to do a great job, and appreciate them being so willing to step in and do that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.